$155 million, $65 million more than was expected. And while the ministers of government have celebrated this wildly unanticipated revenue from GST, the average person is struggling to make ends meet. And the average local business is struggling to keep its doors open and its lights on. It is obvious that the tax burden in Anguilla is too high. There must be an ethical equilibrium, a balance between the obligation to pay tax and the fairness of that taxation. The GST committee coined the phrase tax gouging, meaning the practice of imposing taxes to a level much higher than is considered reasonable or fair by any reasonable person. We believe that this phrase, tax gouging, is appropriate in these circumstances. And while a goods and services tax or some other tax may have been necessary, the extent of the tax burden today must be fair and reasonable. This is what the members of the Anguilla United Front seek to accomplish. The AUF is prepared to do the hard work to reduce the tax burden because we know that doing so will lead to greater prosperity for our families living in Anguilla. It will lead to the expansion of local businesses. It will lead to greater growth in the economy. It will lead to an increase in the construction of homes for our young people and our families. And it will lead to greater encouragement for our young entrepreneurs to take that leap of faith. Indeed, reducing the tax burden will give vital relief for families in the face of this cost of living squeeze. A squeeze where the purchase of uniforms, school supplies, shoes, clothing, and yes, food have forced our families to live hand to mouth, month after month. And importantly, this tax relief can be implemented responsibly. It can be done without increasing borrowing, without decreasing the scheduled payments on public debt, without having an impact on existing and future public services, and absolutely no impact on the Senior Shield program, which currently costs approximately $6.7 million per year. And as I mentioned Senior Shield, let me say this. Senior Shield has been an important addition to the provision of health services for a segment of our people in Anguilla, the elderly. They demand our attention and our respect. Some of my family members, in fact, benefit from Senior Shield. Contrary to this APM government's bold-faced lies and unfounded claims in the pursuit of political mileage, the Anguilla United Front has no intention of removing Senior Shield. In fact, it is our hope and expectation that this program be expanded. It is also our hope and expectation that this government guarantee its commitment to Senior Shield by bringing legislation to the House of Assembly before the next general election in order to ground it in law. Taking care of our seniors should never be a political football or be used to seek to instill fear in the minds of our senior citizens. It is not right. In fact, it is frankly disgusting for the government of the day to try to scare our senior citizens by misrepresenting the AUF's position on Senior Shield. But it will not fool anyone. The government must do more than lip talk and immediately bring legislation to the House of Assembly to legally formalize the Senior Shield program. The Anguilla United Front's focus is on taking care of our people, including our senior citizens. It's about supporting our local businesses, reducing the high taxation burden, and encouraging economic growth. By decreasing the tax burden on our people and local businesses, we will generate additional revenue through growth in the economy. And notice, I have not even mentioned the revenue that the government is earning from the .ai domain name, which delivered more than $75 million for the government of Anguilla in 2023, and it is growing. There is irrefutable proof that lower taxes creates a more dynamic and entrepreneurial economy. And so today, the AUF is presenting the foundation for long-term growth. The chair of the GST Task Committee is our island-wide elected representative, the Honorable Kyle Hodge. We all know how Honorable Hodge made his way into politics. And we all know the strong stance that he took against the implementation of the GST. In chairing the committee, Honorable Kyle Hodge would have reached out and engaged many persons from many sectors, all of whom weighed in on this significant proposal which we are presenting today. And so, with that, let me welcome the Honorable Mr. Kyle Hodge, who will present the Anguilla United Front Relief Plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Leader. I adopt the protocol already established. Good afternoon. My fellow Anguillians, in this time together, I would like to briefly lay out the Anguilla United Front's plans to right-size our tax regime, rebalance our fiscal strategy, and provide tax relief to the people of Anguilla. In 2021, the APM administration passed the Goods and Services Tax legislation against the will of the people after a majority of elected officials in the House of Assembly voted against the bill. Let me remind you, 6 noes and 5 yeses. The government then enlisted the help of the unelected members of parliament to pass the tax bill. While constitutional, it goes against the principles of democratic governments and the pursuits of self-governance. The tax law that is currently governing this country is not representative of the will of the people. Let me repeat that. The tax law that is currently governing this country is not representative of the will of the people. It is the wishes of the British government implemented by the Anguilla Progressive Movement. The other thing that we cannot fail to address is the blatant flip-flop perpetuated by this government. This administration was elected on the premise that they would not implement the GST law, and speech after speech accused the AUF party of being the tax man coming for your business and your future. But who is the tax man now, knocking down your door and destroying your favorite mango tree? The Anguilla Progressive Movement. In a quick 4 years, we have not only been overtaxed, but also over-regulated. It is truly mind-boggling. In politics, it's simple. Say what you mean and mean what you say. We reject the idea that their hands were tied, that this was somehow set in motion and nothing could be done. Anguilla is the only British overseas territory with the goods and services tax. In February of 2023, Guernsey, a British Crown dependency, rejected the goods and services tax in favor of other reforms. The people of Guernsey were presented with 4 different options that could help to set the country's finances on a more sustainable path. I mention that because the Anguillan people thought they voted for a government that would fight and stand up for them. They thought they voted for a government with a backbone, but got a flower-pap government instead. What changed between the campaign and winning the election? Nothing. Anguilla's economy was still in a slump. We were still recovering from Hurricane Irma and deep in the devastation of the pandemic, with closed borders, businesses and consumers being besieged with higher inflation and shipping costs. Nothing changed. The only thing that changed was the minds of 6 individuals who lacked the willpower to stand for what they say they would do. They refused to stand up for you then, and they will refuse to stand up for you in the future. In fact, if you conduct a comparative review of what governments were doing during the pandemic crisis, you would find that most governments were providing some form of stimulus or major tax relief. In our case, this government raised fees and raised taxes on top of global inflation and increased shipping costs. Naturally, inflation and higher shipping costs would have had a positive variance in revenue collection, but no amount of taxation is enough for this administration. And now they want to claim that businesses are engaging in price gouging when many are just trying to break even after all their tax gouging of businesses and citizens. By June, just 6 months of this year, they already tax gouge us to brag about $200 million in reserves on top of taking another $50 million of the people's money in their supplementary budget. Fellow Anguillians, given the GST format that this administration has chosen and the daily pain and suffering it has caused the people of Anguilla, the Anguilla United Front decided to form a committee comprising of a cross-section of Anguillians, irrespective of political affiliation, professionals from various walks of life, and the ordinary man and woman. Our committee met over a few months analyzing data as available from the government and talking face-to-face with over 300 constituents, collecting more data through our survey. 90% of the community is dissatisfied with GST, and 94% wanted changes or full repeal of GST. I'll repeat that. 90% of the community is dissatisfied with GST, and 94% wanted changes or full repeal of GST. Listening to private citizens and many people with businesses helped us to formulate a strategy to put forward a proposal for this government to give immediate relief to our people. We have listened and we agreed that the hurt that GST is causing to our people is too severe and that real changes cannot wait until election time. But if, for some reason, this government does not move forward with such changes, when we are elected next year, we will progress these proposals to be implemented. Our relief plan provides immediate relief to everyone living in Anguilla by removing the 13% GST at the point of sale entirely for 4 sectors: retailers, wholesalers, manufacturers, and restaurants. In addition, we would provide additional relief by removing GST at the port on all imports and replace it with an average 9% import duty, which would end the additional compounding issue. Let's take a look at the first part. In 2022, the government of Anguilla would have released a graphic depicting the GST performance for July 2022 to May 2023 and accounted for each sector over a 10-month period. It showed that we can give immediate relief to every family by exempting just 4 sectors totally from GST. These sectors only accounted for 3.1 to 6.8%, or 20% combined of everything collected by IRD. From the 2023 IRD collections, those 4 sectors would bring immediate relief of about 19 million EC dollars to you, the people of Anguilla. That is up to 13% extra money in your pocket that you can have to purchase more at every store, or maybe just enough to not have to put things back on the shelf, or pay down your debt faster, or catch up on that payment plan, or make that healthier choice, or send your child to school well equipped. The second part of our plan is to remove GST from all imports and replace it with a 9% import duty to remove the confusion and additional cash flow pressures of GST that never seems to get back into anyone's pocket after waiting months to claim it back. This replacement of 13% GST with a 9% import duty will rebalance and simplify customs collections and provide a projected 19 million of relief to the people and businesses. Based on 2023 port collections, approximately 43 million would remain as a non-refundable, predictable revenue stream. People of Anguilla, we all saw that opening the borders would have closed the 22 million gap in 2022 without GST. But already, in 6 months of this year, government of Anguilla could have excluded these 4 sectors and still would have a surplus many times more than that 22 million that was needed. With relief and elimination of confusion and compounding of GST at the port, this plan would still leave government with a surplus of more than 160 million after 2 years of tax gouging since they passed GST against the will of the people. You have to ask yourself, where is the empathy for the people of Anguilla and the daily struggle to make ends meet? Government has weakened your spending power to increase theirs. It's time for us to rebalance and provide the necessary relief that allows you to have more spending power while maintaining the ability of government to meet the needs and obligations of the country. This plan will manifest into true partnership and collaboration between both private and public sector, and we see it as a first step to take a responsible approach to establishing a fair system that the Anguilla United Front would continue as the new government without promising something we cannot deliver. Real relief and real changes, not empty slogans. Thank you. I'll now call Honorable Shelia Rogers Webster to the podium.
Thank you very much, Kyle. Good afternoon, everyone. Please let me express my sincerest appreciation for you joining us via Facebook Live here today. I wish to adopt the protocol that has already been established. When I committed to running for office 2.5 years ago, and I humbly asked my constituents to give me an opportunity to serve, I promised two main things: to work hard to improve the quality of life of my constituents, and two, to always be honest about my intentions and limitations. As I speak here today, my constituents are currently facing some extremely difficult circumstances. It is extremely difficult to hear how high the cost of living has gotten for them, how tough it is to give their children healthy meals and provide all of the school supplies while covering all of their costs for utilities, mortgage, rent, and car payments. It seems as though they are on a constant hamster wheel. Some have actually admitted to developing mental health issues, such as paranoia and anxiety. Some businesses have closed under the pressure, and others stay open while consumed with large amounts of debt and overdraft facilities that have become even more difficult in the wake of upfront GST payments, regardless of customer credit lines and constant stress from the fear of audits. Having served in the public service for over 14 years, I understand completely the need for regular and stable tax revenues. But it is time for a more balanced approach, as my colleagues have presented before. I have always had significant concerns with GST, as I felt that consumption taxes tend to be the toughest on the most vulnerable members of our society. That belief is even stronger today, as for the past 2 years, I have witnessed the effects of GST on the Anguillian culture, the economy, and the overall quality of life. While there are some who have not felt the serious impacts of GST due to their privileged circumstances, there are many who are struggling daily to meet their commitments while facing more stress than ever in their lives. Now I'd like to zero in on home ownership. In 2020-2021, the National Bank of Anguilla launched their comeback home loans with 100% financing for qualified home builders. This was largely taken advantage of by young Anguillians like myself who could meet the qualification requirements. After speaking with more than 10 of those homeowners, the cries and challenges are the same. Funds budgeted for the projects on average took homeowners to only 2/3 of the project. Many remain unfinished, or key areas of the homes are incomplete and remain incomplete while they're actually repaying their mortgages. It seems as though no one could imagine the full impact of GST being implemented only 1 year later, as it has contributed to such shortfalls and disappointments, adding to the supply chain challenges of the pandemic. Let's move to young Anguillians who are currently interested in building as we speak. They are plagued by incredibly high material costs that now also attracts GST. I'll give you an example. In November 2021, a roof was poured at a cost of $13,035. In 2024, another roof, roughly the same size, was poured at a cost of $14,729.55. $1,694.55 was paid in GST. That $1,694.55 could have bought 12 additional yards of concrete. While this government wants to blame the impacts of GST on the price gouging of the service providers, it is important to note that the per yard rate for concrete remained the same in both scenarios. The change was as a direct result of the 13% added for GST. In the past, building out of pocket in Anguilla was actually feasible. It has become more and more difficult, and the current GST structure has only made it worse. As a matter of fact, for some young Anguillians, it is almost impossible to have a home. Home ownership has traditionally been something unique to Anguilla and Anguillians. Whether you're a housekeeper in the hospitality industry, or you are a clerical officer, or you were a police officer, home ownership was a very possible reality. Today, that is not the case. Not only are building materials astronomically higher in price, but the culture of crediting materials has been largely removed as businesses must meet their monthly GST payment deadlines or face extortionist level fines. That has not only dimmed the hopes and slowed the progress for home ownership, but also it has resulted in lost revenues for businesses from customers unable to purchase from their inventories. From the inception, the GST structure was only designed to serve the government. 13% upfront payments at the ports for businesses, 13% at the point of sale for customers, extremely high fines for delayed payments, and the grouping of businesses together to force all into the GST structure, even if they don't individually meet the threshold for inclusion. Many young aspiring entrepreneurs have gotten caught up in this. For example, an aspiring entrepreneur having a small, modest clothing store, but also wanting to host an entertainment event which attracts GST, has to register both the clothing company as well as the entertainment event for GST collection. Now, we all know, anybody that is in event and event management knows that the costs to host events are extremely high. Events have a significant cultural consideration for the island. Also, it allows for economic development. We see that with our festivals. We see that with the most recent Anguilla Summer Festival. Yet, any promoter hosting an event in this country is required to pay GST on each ticket sold, irrespective of their profit margins, whether they break even, whether they make a profit, or whether they make a loss. On each ticket, you're required to pay 13%. This is also the case for large companies, even when some businesses are not operating in a profitable state. Anguillians have always had an entrepreneurial spirit, and they continue to try out various business opportunities. But the operating costs for small businesses in the current economic climate and under GST's demands have proven to be an impossible undertaking for those who have been forced to close. We were initially told that we needed to fill a $22 million budgetary gap. That was over $100+ million ago. We have surpassed that goal multiple times, and from far more than just GST. This says to me that despite surpassing that goal and government's revenue collection overperforming, with citizens crying about the cost of living, government has refused to respond with real solutions. today, our proposal will bring immediate relief to the most vulnerable members of society. It will increase everyone's spending power and improve the liquidity of businesses. We look forward to discussing our proposal in detail with various stakeholders over the coming months, and we hope that the government will make the necessary changes without forcing people to wait for another election. If they refuse to do so, if they refuse to commit themselves to making these very necessary changes, we as an Anguilla United Front team are committed to making all of these necessary changes. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Many thanks for your presence here or those following on social media. I too adopt the protocol that was established earlier. We, as the elected members of the Anguilla United Front in the Anguilla House of Assembly, are here today to make a presentation on how we believe the government of Anguilla can assist households in the Anguillan community as they struggle to make ends meet after the implementation of GST at 13%. I have reached out to members of my community to learn how they're managing during these hard times. From a single mother of 4 with children ages 3, 7, 11, and 15, she wrote, and I quote, "Mr. Connor, I think I've mentioned to you that the cost of living in Anguilla is extremely high. Firstly, let's talk about the minimum wage of US $6 an hour, which isn't enough, especially being in a single-parent home. After those taxes have been deducted from your pay, there is nothing much you can do to sustain a thriving family. And let's not talk about the grocery shopping since the GST has been implemented. That was the breaking point for the majority of my fellow Anguillians." She continued, "When you have rent to be paid alongside utility bills, there's no money left for personal use, such as insurance and health care. This is scary that we are in our minds where people on the outside are concerned, including tourists, as they too found GST is killing the country rapidly, and that will be a huge negative impact on our tourism industry." Another family of 4 wrote, "Mr. Connor, my concerns are as follow. Utility bills. The high cost of electricity, made worse by fuel charges and now GST, are leading to an average monthly bill of 500 EC to 600 and even higher, which is significantly higher than the previous range of 150 EC to 250 EC. Despite discussions about renewable energy solutions like solar panels, no substantial progress has been made over the past year. If Anguilla had been allowed to implement renewable energy in phases, it might have been fully operational by now. In regard to school supplies, school uniforms and other educational supplies should be tax exempt from the moment they arrive on the island to simplify the process. The current procedure of requiring paperwork for tax exemption is seen as cumbersome. Additionally, one business owner has decided not to accept the tax exemption forms this year, which negatively impacts the consumer, despite the business owner's valid reasons. And in regard to the impact on our well-being, she described how, and I quote again, "The GST on essential items such as cleaning supplies, toiletries, and healthy food options like fruits and vegetables is seen as a particularly burdensome. These items, necessary to maintain a safe and healthy household, are becoming increasingly expensive, forcing families to make difficult choices that could lead to poor health outcomes. My concern, fellow Anguillians, is that these increased costs on essential goods and services are putting a strain on families, potentially leading to negative health and financial consequences. GST is making it harder for people to make the best choices for themselves and their families, especially in terms of maintaining a healthy lifestyle and meeting basic needs. Another family of four. This individual focused on several negative effects of GST on working class families. These include less disposable income. That means families cannot afford extras. Example, extracurricular activities for their children, going on vacation, going out to eat at local restaurants. And the cost to purchase groceries has increased significantly. Example, before GST, monthly groceries would total between $800 and $900 EC. Now monthly groceries exceed over $1,500 EC dollars. They also noted that parents find themselves having to work more than one job to afford the rising cost of living, and that families so strapped for money cannot afford to attend doctor appointments. Some are even foregoing buying much-needed medicine or skipping critical medical tests. They also shared that the concerns families cannot afford to save like they used to. Even when we budget to save, it is extremely difficult. As a result, unexpected financial emergencies often call for GoFundMe or fundraisers to assist individuals, and that the average family probably doesn't have at least a 3-month savings safety net. And to families caring for pets as well, they reminded me that GST on pet food should be removed to help avoid the number of stray or abandoned family pets. As my colleague, the Honorable Kyle Hodge, has summarized, the Anguilla United Front Relief Plan, we see it as an urgent beginning to rebalance the public and private sector after 2 years of tax gouging. These examples bring out why we are not waiting for an election season to seek relief on behalf of our people, especially working-class family homes. With respect to the increased cost of living, we have heard how GST, and I quote, has really hit working-class families hard. Everyday essentials like food, clothing, and healthcare all become more expensive. These families are already struggling to make ends meet, and now they're facing even more financial pressure just to cover the basics. The Anguilla United Front Plan would reduce the cost of all retail, wholesale, and manufactured goods at point of sale, which include bakery goods, often purchased by busy working families, by up to 13% across previously included and exempted categories of food, and make everything we purchase more affordable while global inflation is slowing down, especially in the US. And we're listening and hearing to the housing affordability crisis. My constituent described how, and I quote, building or buying a home was always a challenge, but with GST on construction materials, it's become nearly impossible for many to own a home. On top of that, the high bank interest rates are making things worse. Owning a home, which was once the Anguillan dream, is slipping out of the reach for a lot of our people, leaving them stuck renting, which is also getting more and more expensive. With the removal of GST on all retail and manufactured goods, building material and concrete costs would be reduced by 13%, making both repairs and new construction more affordable. And as global interests come down, the banks should follow suit. Financial instability and job insecurity. The added burden of GST is pushing some families to the edge, forcing parents to look for extra work just to keep up, which means less time with their family and children and more stress. That's putting a strain on the quality of family life. And with added pressure for additional jobs, in their words, and I quote, small businesses where many working class folk work are feeling the squeeze from GST also. With higher operational costs, some are having to cut jobs, reduce hours, or lower wages. This isn't just affecting the businesses, it's hitting the workers who rely on the job to support their families, end of quote. In addition to the relief for GST in our plan for all purchases at point of sale for working families, by also removing GST at the port, small businesses can reduce operational costs with freedom from all the accounting and reporting burdens, as well as the extra cash flow challenges from higher inventory costs and having to pay GST up front, regardless of credit given to the customers. For restaurants, businesses, and their workers, relief from GST would also allow patrons to purchase additional dishes and increase their willingness to add more tips to their checks and help the workers directly. So, my people, the Anguilla United Front has been listening and hearing you. With relief across all points of sales and imports from GST, we believe that significant relief can ease the lives of everyone in our community in countless ways. And we agree the Anguilla proposals, and I know there's much work to be done on the cost of energy. But this plan focuses on immediate relief from so many ways that GST has been impacting every family and resident. And we feel the same pain at home and throughout our families and villages. We expect the government of Anguilla to adopt this plan or call an election so we can give relief to our people now. Thank you for your attention. Our next presenter is my colleague, the Honorable Jose Vanterpool.
Good afternoon to all persons in attendance, as well as those who are viewing via Facebook or following via radio. Today marks a momentous occasion. I know that persons have been asking for quite some time, what is the AUF's plan for GST? When are we going to roll out that plan? Well, wait no longer, for today, here we are. I want to start off by thanking Madam Leader for ensuring that this task was set out as a priority for the party and seeing to it that it was done. I'd also like to thank the Honorable Kyle Hodge as lead of the GST committee, as well as everyone who assisted in collecting the data, creating the plan, and producing the report, which now represents a way forward that introduces relief for the people of Anguilla. As we gather here today, the irony is not lost on me. I ran with a party that planned to enact GST, and we lost to a party that promised no GST, even though that promise quickly went out of the window. At the time, I understood the need for Anguilla to pay its own way and why there were pressures to introduce a broad-based tax. Yet, I wasn't exactly convinced that GST was that solution. I got hope, as I'm sure many of us did, From the interview that Dr. Ellis Lorenzo Webster conducted on Radio Anguilla with Mr. Keystone Greaves, where he would have referenced a conversation that he had with Ms. Baroness Shuggs, head of the FCDO at the time, where she assured him that Anguilla was not locked into GST, and as long as a viable alternative to filling the gap was presented, the United Kingdom government would not be opposed. But what happened after the election? GST was forced down the throats of every Anguillian. And don't be fooled by the rhetoric that this government says that they enacted what they meant. For what we face today is 100% the APM's GST. I will forever respect the Honorable Kyle Hodge for the bold move he made in voting no to the GST legislation and subsequently for crossing the floor. This isn't because I was hoping that government would fall, but simply because he stuck to his principles. He believed in finding a viable alternative, but did not see any effort put in place by the current APM administration to realize it. Instead, this administration took and ran with whatever the United Kingdom government placed in front of them. While the UK was offering their citizens tax relief because they felt that during the effects of a historic pandemic was not the time to be increasing taxes, but instead a time for supporting households and businesses, this was the same time that they were forcing us to enact GST. This plan that we present today represents an alternative that we believe the people will find pragmatic in our current situation. An alternative that allows us to balance our budget, grow our nation, while offering compassion, opportunities, and relief for all. I don't want to spend my time going over the points already mentioned by my colleagues, but I do want to highlight some important aspects of where we find ourselves today. First of all, I can understand the UK's recommendation, and they're advocating for the collection of GST at the ports, seeing that the customs duty structure, which predated GST and still exists today, enabled government to reliably connect their revenue upfront at the port. The goods and services tax was intended to be introduced to close a budgetary gap of 22 million EC dollars, but its implementation during a period where our economy was in lockdown and our borders was closed was unconscionable. While the manner in which this government implemented GST ensured that government's cash flows are secured, it came at the expense of the cash flows of the private sector, the private citizens, as well as compounded taxes and higher prices. In 2021, this administration would have stated for the budget that they reverted to the 2019 budgetary estimates. As I just mentioned, GST was planned to fill a budgetary gap of around 22 million EC dollars. GST, like customs duties, is charged on CIF, cost, insurance, and freight. Coming out of the pandemic, where supply chains were disrupted, costs went up 200 to 300% in some instances. And as freight costs escalated way beyond even that, it is more than questionable if the GST implementation was necessary at that time to fill the gap, and especially at such a high rate. My people, please don't be fooled by the rhetoric that GST would have been implemented at a rate of 17% had the AUF been elected. It is clear that this current government had no plan regarding the implementation of GST, and it seems clear they've never fully grasped the impacts of the law in its entirety. And this is based on the multiple times we have had to go back to the House of Assembly in order to make amendments. This administration is now tax gouging the people of Anguilla, all while trying to blame our local businesses for unfair practices. They will say whatever they want or they need to in an attempt to try and escape their broken promise. I have also heard, and I'm sure that following this press conference we will hear persons mention, that despite the AUF's proposed phased approach to GST, that by now, in 2024, all phases of the plan would have been in effect. So, what is the point? The point is this. The phased approach would have allowed for time to analyze and evaluate each step of the proposal in order to determine the effect on the people and in order to enable the government to tweak the tax where necessary. That approach would have allowed time to see the opening of the borders and to see whether that would have closed the gap, following which the rest of the phases may have been able to be put on hold. Yes, I'll admit, the government has made some changes to the tax along the way. But I believe that this is largely in response to the pressure from we, the people, who are feeling it, and that they have fallen short of giving real relief, given the extensive burden that we, the people, are facing. From the campaign in 2019, I have been advocating about the potential of .ai as a source of major revenue generation for Anguilla. From the budgetary records, we can see an actual amount of revenue that was collected for the .ai in 2016 of just over 751,000 EC dollars. That's 751,000 EC dollars over the course of the entire year. Today, in 2024, we are seeing .ai revenue bring in 3 times that figure each week. Once again, in 2016, AI brought in over 751,000 EC over the course of the entire year. We are now realizing 3 times that figure each and every week. If you think that's significant, just wait until later this year when the domain renewals kick in, and we can expect to see that number double, if not increase greater. Context changed, and when they do, we as a people, we as a government, we as leaders should adjust accordingly. The situation we faced then is not the same situation we face today. The budgetary gap of $22 million that used to exist is no longer part of the context in which we exist today. This is why we need to ask ourselves, is the current GST structure of today working in the best interest of our people? Is this structure in the best interest of our families and our businesses which are struggling to survive? I say no. The Anguilla United Front says no. And that is why today we are here to present what this current administration promised to present, yet failed to deliver, a viable alternative to the goods and services tax. And with that, I'll invite our party leader back to the podium to wrap up our remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Jose. And thank you, Honorable Colligan Connor, Honorable Shelia Rogers-Webster, and indeed Honorable Kyle Hodge for your deep, thoughtful, and practical presentations. I want to emphasize that people need money to spend. The government is there to chart a course for the country which ultimately benefits the people. Tax is necessary for roads, hospitals, schools, etc. But there is a point where you tip the scale and you hurt people and it becomes too much. We believe that the form of GST, as it now exists, has tipped the scale. For the naysayers who would want to say that this cannot be done, let me stop you right there. We all know that laws can be amended from time to time and even repealed. We have seen numerous amendments to the very same GST, and we have seen the removal of property tax on residential homes. The removal of GST from these sectors can be done and needs to be done immediately. Let me summarize the essence of the Anguilla United Front GST relief plan as presented by the Honorable Kyle Hodge. The removal of GST from retail. Think grocery stores, clothing and shoe stores, mom and pop shops, etc. Wholesale, restaurants, manufacturing, and entertainment sectors. The removal of the 13% GST at the ports and replaced with 9% import tax. We have run the numbers. And you can see that while those 4 key areas make up only 20% of the total GST revenue, it will impact and assist 100% of the people. Our families, our children, and our local businesses. Make no mistake, this is putting people first. We wish to thank all of the members of the GST Committee for their hard work and dedication in assisting the members of the Anguilla United Front in formulating this GST relief plan. We will be making our rounds on the various radio programs and media houses, engaging with identified sectors for further discussions, and holding town hall meetings in order to present a comprehensive proposal to the government of Anguilla. We are not sitting until after elections. Balancing the GST is of utmost priority. We are convinced that these measures can be implemented today and bring immediate relief to our people. The government is free to accept all, or some, or even a variation of our GST relief plan. But what it cannot do, and what it ought not do, is to do nothing. And if this APM administration does not take the steps to provide relief to our people, then we, the Anguilla United Front, will do so once elected to office. And with that, I bring an end to this press briefing. I would like to thank you for tuning in, and you will be hearing further from us over the weeks and months to come. Thank you very much.